everybody, and welcome to another episode of the New England Sports Weekly Podcast. I am, as always, your host, Sean Metcalf, and I'm glad that you decided to join me this evening. And a little late here. Sorry, got stopped by TSA. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that's just a MLB umpire. I had to drop everything. I was frisked very thoroughly at the door by that umpire. Man, was it invasive. just kidding, folks. I do apologize about the technical delays that I had before the show started, but we're here and rolling if you're watching the live broadcast now. And if you're listening to the podcast, just enjoy the humor there. But it is a packed week, as it usually always is, but I really am not really overselling it this week. Is when we left you off last week, Celtics were still in the middle of their head coach search to take over for Brad Stevens, who now moved up into the office. The Red Sox were still in second place. They had a big week coming up with the Rays and the Yankees. They had a weekend set against the Royals. So they had a lot on their plate over the weekend. Of course, always things going on with the Patriots, even in the middle of the offseason. And even going to introduce a new segment this week, the little things. So keep your attention all the way through the show as we'll introduce that for you. But we'll jump right into our out-of-the-box segment. Now, of course, I had the show all planned out here over the last couple of days. But, of course, sports, always ongoing. Everything happens every day. So the best laid plans just get thrown in the trash can at this point. As this afternoon, the Boston Celtics have now found their replacement for Brad Stevens, as it is going to be Ime Dubaku, one of those tongue twisters. But Ime was the assistant coach for the Brooklyn Nets, and he actually was a coach on Team USA, where the Celtics actually had a lot of players that played on that roster back in 2019, Tatum, Brown, and Walker, who is no longer here, and Jaylen Brown as well. And excuse me, my apologies, as well as Marcus Smart. So he's got a lot of experience with this Celtics team, either facing them as an opponent or with their roster, coaching them in World Cup tournaments for Team USA. And of course, as we just mentioned, Kemba Walker is no longer on the Boston Celtics, as he was traded away to Oklahoma City. And in return, the Celtics will get back an old friend of ours, Al Horford. So we'll touch on that a little bit later on here in the show. Not really one of those moves that you're going to get all excited about and jump up and down about and go buy jerseys. But it is important for the Celtics. We'll go over that importance and let you know why for the Boston Celtics. And the Red Sox, they keep on their winning ways as they went to Kansas City. Even though the series itself didn't go well from the standpoint of them winning that series, they only won one game in that series. That last game was just a debacle with the defense. But the good thing is Tampa kept losing 6 in a row at the time, now 7 in a row after losing to the Boston last night. So as a result, the Red Sox jumped back into first place. As we mentioned, last night was a wild game for the Red Sox. So the Red Sox are now a game and a half up on the Tampa Bay Rays as we inch closer to the All-Star break. So folks, if you predicted the Red Sox to be a cellar dweller this season, you are going to be sadly disappointed, or I would hope if you're a Red Sox fan, you are rejoiced right now and you're having a lot of fun watching this Red Sox team. Maybe not the pitching staff, as we'll touch on that later. It's kind of a little bit up in the air at the moment. It's kind of a mess, especially at that front end of the rotation. but we'll touch on that here later on in the show. But as we mentioned, there's a lot of Celtics news, so we'll just jump right into that. As the Boston Celtics, as mentioned right off the top of the show and in the Out of the Box segment, they did find a new head coach as they were down to Ime Udoka and Chauncey Billups, who a lot of people are more familiar with Chauncey Billups, as he was a longtime player, point guard in the league, bounced around, was actually originally drafted by the Boston Celtics, but was traded away to the Denver Nuggets at the time. So again, he played a long time in the league, played with Denver, played with Detroit Pistons, where he ended up winning a title. As I mentioned, he towards the end of their career, just like a lot of these superstars, unless you're one of the big time players that you can make your own decisions, you don't really stay with one team. But he bounced around, was a good point guard in the league. I remember watching him, and I was always a fan of the game, of his game. So he was one of the finalists, along with Udoka. I'm sorry, it's one of those first names. I'll stick with Coach Ime at this point in time in the broadcast. But with Coach Ime and Chauncey Billups, we're down to the last two. And with Ime, what really sold the Celtics on that was that he had a lot of experience with the young core of this Celtics team. Back in 2019, the Celtics sent a contingent, basically a lot of their starting lineup played for Team USA in the World Cups back in 2019. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, and the now departed Kemba Walker all played on that team. So he got to coach them up close and personal. As I mentioned, in that World Cup team, I believe that was one of the last few years that Coach K was involved with Team USA. I could be wrong there. It could have been the 2018 Olympics, could have been the last for Coach K. But anyways, Coach Ime was on that team. And he was one of the assistants that was with them all the way through that whole World Cup experience. So he got up close and personal with a lot of those Celtic stars. So, and they came back with glowing reports about him. They loved him. And of course, he went on to be the assistant with the Brooklyn Nets, who's now part of the Steve Nash staff, or was, I should say, at the time, part of the Steve Nash staff. Say that 3 times fast, folks. Down in Brooklyn with that superstar-laden lineup with Kyrie, James Harden, Kevin Durant. And they actually did lose to the not to the Atlanta Hawks, but to the Philadelphia 76ers in that series. So it was a debacle all the way around for that Nets team. Not Coach Ime's fault. It was more some injuries going on with that starting lineup. And of course, always an enigma with Kyrie, Durant, and Harden. World-class players, but again, maybe not the most mentally stable. I don't know, mentally stable, but at least as far as sometimes they'll check out. They'll always come up with some type of excuse. Something's going on. So anyways, with that type of talent, you're surprised that the Brooklyn Nets didn't go farther. But as we see, Coach Ime was able to get was around a lot of those superstars, able to get a lot of experience coaching those type of players. Now, obviously, you're the assistant, so you're not the head man. So I'm not sitting here saying that this is the greatest hire of all time at head coach. Don't get me wrong on that part. But I just like the fact that he was with that Brooklyn staff. He always gets good ratings as a player's type of coach, which in this day and age of the NBA, you have to be a player's coach. You can't get by being a hard ass. And I know Greg Popovich always is the example for, Greg Popovich is a hard ass, and he survives. Yeah, he's a hard ass to the media. He's not a hard ass to his players. He's a player's coach. Now he's not the type of guy that I think is going to go out and have a beer like Steve Kerr with the Warriors did with Kevin Durant, but still he is more of a player's coach than people give him credit for. Like I said, he just puts on that persona, that hard ass persona to the media. But he, of course, nobody's going to be Greg Popovich. But my point being is that players' coaches are the ones that succeed in the NBA. Long gone are the days where you're going to be a drill sergeant on an NBA court. You'll be lucky to make it out of training camp. You'll be lucky if you get hired, to be honest, in this day and age, because the players run their teams, or at least they try to anyways. We see that all the time. And of course, Brad Stevens was the head man himself. So he knows how this Celtics team feels and is going to react. So, of course, he went to his players, checked in, and from all reports today, as this was broken by Adrian Wojnarowski, who is at ESPN and is basically the Adam Schefter of basketball. So basically whatever he says, people generally take for gospel. And of course, it's turned out to be very true. He reported that they were working on the deal, and as the day went along, reports have basically come out saying that this is pretty much a done deal. And everything is almost ready to go. So with the hiring of Coach Ime, the Celtics are getting that guy that the star players and Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have reportedly been high on and have approved, because that was the big thing that people were talking about as the season started to wind down for the Boston Celtics, was that they started to lose the locker room, meaning Brad Stevens. They really didn't listen to him. He would try to tell guys not to go out during COVID, whatever your feelings are, whatever. I'm not getting into that part of it, but just saying with the rules that the NBA had in place, well, the protocols, guys were going out, partying, having fun, which of course I don't have any problem with that portion of it. But my point here is that there were rules that were set in place that you weren't supposed to be going out on the road, and when you're at home, you're just supposed to stay with family and all those things. But of course, there were lots of reports that the rest of the NBA was upset with how the Celtics mishandled the situation. And of course, we have the whole Tristan Thompson situation, whether he missed a lot of games, but some of the reports were that it was not because he had COVID per se, but he broke the COVID protocols and went out and partied. And of course, I'm not going to get to the whole TMZ thing there with how many women he slept in, as entertaining as it would be. But when it comes to how Brad Stevens managed guys like Tristan Thompson and the rest of that locker room, even though he would say not to go out, not to do these things, all the reports were towards the last month or two of that season, he just absolutely lost control of that whole locker room, which is sad, because Brad is a basketball tactician, for lack of a better term, is a good coach from that standpoint. Now, obviously, dealing with superstar egos, that's something in this day and age of basketball that you have to be able to do. And I'm not even talking about the last 5 years, probably since the days of the 90s Bulls. That's probably where everything really started, even though that there's been some superstars, obviously loaded teams like the Lakers and Celtics of the 80s. Things really changed with Jordan, Pippen, and Dennis Rodman back in the early to mid 90s with those back-to-back three-peats that they had to get those 6 titles. That's where Phil Jackson and his whole philosophy, not just the triangle offense, but just how he approached managing those players. So basically since then, so for what, 25, 30 something years, it's basically been a players league the whole way through in these past 30 years. You can't really lay the hammer down, or else you're pretty much gone. So the point being, in this case, Brad knew that he had to find a coach that was going to be somebody the players wanted on this staff, wanted to coach them, is a player's coach. Maybe not going to be buddy, but he's not going to be that disciplinarian that a lot of old school basketball fans want. And there may still be pockets of players out there that would still take to that coaching, and it may last for a little bit, but you still need to find that person. And that's what they found here when they brought in Coach Ime. To be honest, I think this hire will work in the short term. Anyways, as far as I think he'll be able to reel these guys back in, as far as some of their egos, massage them, get them to play the way that we expect Tatum and Brown in this core players, which has some upheaval right now that you traded away Brown, which we'll get to here in a second. And I'm sorry, Kemba Walker, which we'll get to here in a second. But at this point in time, after Brad lost that locker room, things seem to be heading in the wrong direction in the fast lane, really. So bringing in Coach Ime, who these players like, who has a lot of experience with them, and not just on those summer teams with Team USA in the Cup teams, but also coaching against them. So he got to see them firsthand a majority of the time, with the Celtics being in the same conference and both being in that same division. So there's a lot of things that the Celtics players and Coach Ime were able to get to know each other even from a distance. So I think this will be a good hire. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say he's this greatest basketball tactician. He can going to draw up the next triangle offense version of it or something like that and going to revolutionize basketball. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying he's a player's coach that these players respect. So that locker room, I think, will start to come back together. Now, obviously, this organization has a lot to do. I'm not one of those green teamers that's going to be sitting up here saying, oh, they just need one more piece. They just need this. They need that. That Al Horford coming back is great. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and that this is going to work. No, I'm not going to sit here and say that. Because let's be honest, this team took a nosedive from where they have been over the last 3-4 years. This is a team that I know we make fun of them all the time, that they've been to 3 Eastern Conference finals out of the last 4 years. But still, that's a team that has made it that far. They had a lot of talent that they've honestly squandered in these situations where they should be getting more out of their superstars. They should be getting more out of this team. Now, obviously, there's a reason that Danny's gone, and you'll hear him say that it was just a mutual decision. He wanted to retire, blah, 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 blah. All those situations. Fine. You say what you want, Danny. But in reality, over these last 2 years, really, the bubble, even though they made it deep into that playoff run, you could start to see some of the chinks in their armor when it comes to the depth in this team, getting a reliable third scorer to pair with Brown and Tatum. And of course, another thing with Tatum, just sometimes those where he's not willing to take or not willing to distribute in some key situations where he's double, triple teamed and really shouldn't be taking that shot at the time. So things, all that coupled along with some of the roster moves, which really the roster moves were the big thing, obviously, for Danny, that why I think he, in my opinion, was fired, that the Celtics won't tell us, because the depth on this team, I'm not just talking about number 6 through 12 on this roster. I'm talking about some of those starters behind Tatum and Brown. Again, if you don't have that reliable third scorer, somebody that's going to be out there healthy. How are you going to expect just two guys, not even Anthony Davis and LeBron James would be able to drag their team to a NBA Finals with that? I'm not saying the rest of the roster around them is great, but they have Dennis Schroeder. They have Kyle Kuzma. They have good players that are still there. They have some depth. They brought in JaVale McGee. They brought in a lot of these guys that, yeah, they're not going to be superstars to go along with them, but they're good role players. They know what they're supposed to do. And that's what the Celtics have lacked over these last couple of years. They have two superstars. They brought in Kemba Walker, who we all thought was going to be that third scorer, at times was, but again, not reliable. That knee, which we all give Michael Jordan crap for being a bad GM, but at least in his one good decision that he made as the general manager, decided not to bring back Kemba Walker because he knew the medicals on that knee. And this is exactly what the Celtics blew past when they signed him to that big deal. And of course, it came back to bite them horribly. They had to trade what was left of that $40 million out to Oklahoma City, which I honestly was surprised that they were able to find somebody to take on Walker's contract. To be honest, that was something that I thought they'd have a hard time finding a partner to dance with on that contract, because that's just bad. There's a lot of money there that's still left over. And I apologize. It's $70 million that's left over on Walker's deal. So that is just awful. Not that I don't like Kemba. Kemba himself is a good person. When he's healthy, he's a good player, but when you're out there and you can't stay healthy and you're supposed to be that third superstar in the team, yeah, you're not Kyrie, who you're brought in to replace, but still you're a good player. You're an all-star. You're good. But when you're not out there the whole time to stay healthy, then I really was upset that they went forward with that contract, because when they made that signing, yeah, I was happy that they found a third scorer, somebody at his caliber, but there's still that point in the back of my mind with all his history that I was like, when is this going to blow up? This is a ticking time bomb. When will this come back to bite the Celtics? And it basically did the last 2 years. So basically from the get-go, there was time management, load management that they had to deal with Kemba. And this rolls right in to the next point here with having to trade him to Oklahoma City in this regards. This wasn't any move to get back a top pick. In fact, they had to trade a first round to get rid of Kemba. But this was to get rid of that salary. It was a salary dump, because we got back Al Horford, the corpse of Al Horford. Sorry, Anna, if you somehow stumble across my podcast, but your brother is not what he used to be. And not that Al Horford was ever the second coming of Kevin Garnett or Paul Pierce or Shaquille O'Neal or whoever. Throw out a power forward, throw out whoever great player you want to. He ain't it. He's not that guy. He, even in his prime when he was a good player, he just was average. Yeah, I'm going to throw it out there, average Al. And all the green teamers out there who were excited, oh, Al's coming back. You'll get that good locker room guy. Good locker room guy. This is a guy that wanted to be out when they knew Kyrie wasn't coming back, and when they're signing Kemba. Not that he's horrible, that he's this horrible human being, or that he's a bad guy. I don't have anything against him, but still, when these stories come out, and then the green teamers out there want to just be, oh no, he was a great locker room guy. He was this, he was that, and they just want to ignore some of the stop signs, those red lights that came up regarding Al Horford. Now you're going to just ignore him again here. Now that he comes back, he's this great locker room guy. He's going to be great for these young guys. He bounced out from Philly because his production was down from his huge contract, the mistake of a contract they gave him. Ooh, boy, I couldn't see that one coming from giving him the max contract for a guy that at his best is just a low-level all-star. Or I shouldn't say low-level all-star, mid-level all-star. But still, to be excited about bringing Al Horford back, take off your green sunglasses, for Christ's sake. We're not talking about the Celtics picking up 2012 Al Horford, 2014 Al Horford. This is the end of the career. This is a salary dump. And if you can't realize that it's a salary dump, you need to get your head out of the sand. You really do. You really, really do. Because the Celtics are not an Al Horford and one piece away. They're a third scorer. They're 2 to 3 more depth pieces. You need a reliable center to pair with Robert Williams or somebody potentially even take that job. So you're 3, more likely 4 pieces away. Of course, the Eastern Conference is always fluctuating. Look, the Atlanta Hawks are now in the Eastern Conference Finals playing the Milwaukee Bucks. And this year, there's been a lot of upheaval in the NBA. So maybe 3 good moves, really good moves, 2 excellent moves might get you there. But just because you have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown still here, there's still a lot of work you have to do. A lot of work. And of course, there's not a lot of great free agents this year. So this is a 2 to 3 year building process. And of course, you can't always bank on your superstars, even if they're young, staying around for the long haul. It's the day and age where guys might be able, they might stay around for 5, 6, 7 years. But once you start to get to year 6, 7, that's where things don't start happening. Then that's where they start calling up their buddy. Tatum might call Devin Booker in Phoenix, or might call Jamal Murray out in Utah or somewhere else, and it might be just the end. He might decide to leave and not sign again. But if you can bring in guys to pair with him, you might just be, and if you can get over the hump to get into the NBA Finals, if you can win, I'm not saying win 5 titles, 3 titles, just if you can maybe win 1, maybe get to the NBA Finals, maybe Tatum feels like, okay, this franchise is moving in the right direction. They're supporting me. We're getting over the hump now. We're getting into the NBA Finals, and we won 1. So if you can get to that situation, maybe he might not jump ship. But if you stay a perennial 6, 7, 8 seed, because you're not bringing in other talent to surround those two, you might be left holding the bag. You might just be left with Jaylen Brown, who I like. Tatum's the better player, but still just one guy. You don't want to just be back in the lane of mediocrity. That's what the Celtics were since after Larry Bird retired. And even though they had Paul Pierce, it was pretty much Paul Pierce until 2007 when they brought in Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen. So you don't want to be stuck in another 15, 17 years of mediocrity again. So take your green glasses off and realize this process is going to take a while. And of course, like I said, going back to their coaching hire, I think that might stem the tide a little bit with how things are going, just because you're with those young guys. I think Coach Iman will be able to relate to these players because, of course, he played in the league for a little bit as well. He's younger. I think he'll be, not that Brad was old, but seeing as Coach Ime was a player in this league, I think he'll be able to at least relate to these guys. I'm not saying long term we're going to have the next name Coach Popovich Phil Jackson, Red Auerbach. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm just saying you might have a guy for 2-3 years where he can bring these guys back together. And if he can bring pieces around, he might stabilize this so that these players feel comfortable in this organization. So so that you don't have what's happened the last couple of years. So we'll see where this goes. Of course, very early stages. Nothing has actually been finalized with the coaching hire, but everything is pretty much unofficially official at this point, if you catch my drift. So it'll be interesting to see once we get closer to October, November time when the season gets ready to start, how this is going to all look for the Celtics, what pieces they bring in, see who they're going to surround Tatum with and Brown if they don't trade Brown to get somebody to pair with him. But we'll keep an eye on that here for you. But the other big story, not just in Red Sox land, but with baseball, has been the pitching scandal with sticky substances on baseballs. Now we'll get into the Red Sox here in a moment, but this is just something that over the last 3-4 days has really caught steam, especially with Monday being the day where they started to check players for any substances. Now, of course, the first one that they checked was Jacob deGrom, the best pitcher in a long, long time since the heyday of Pedro Martinez. He's on that level. And this year, it's unbelievable. He has an ERA of 0.50. There's nothing in front of that point, people. Not a 1.5, 2.5. It's a 0.5 ERA. Not even Pedro Martinez, Bob Gibson, Roger Clemens, throw out anybody. Greg Maddux, nobody. And it has done that. I know the season's not over. I'm just saying, at least to this point in the season, even guys like Pedro Martinez, yeah, you might have like a 1.3 ERA, 1.4. Bob Gibson back in the day had that 1.12, but still, that's ridiculous. But of course, he was the first pitcher that was checked. He didn't have a real issue with it. But as things have started to unravel here over the last couple of days, they have gotten interesting. So before we get into the reactions, let me just give you a little bit of a history lesson here, at least over the last couple of weeks. If you didn't listen to the show last week, basically what the issue is, pitchers are now being checked for foreign substances such as Spider Tech or any other sticky substances, bullfrog, or any combination such as like the Angels were using Coca-Cola, boiling down Coca-Cola, mixing it with pine tar. So that was a big thing that was happening. And of course, there's been a million other things over the years that pitchers have used to try to get that advantage. Now, as far as what a lot of pitchers were saying before Monday came around, you had guys like Garrett Cole, who was stumbling like a bumbling fool after a post-game press conference and dropped a gee whiz or a golly gee, basically, trying to make us all feel bad for him, saying that this is just to get a grip. And of course, Tyler Glasnow, all kinds of high-profile pitchers. I'm not just saying guys like Garrett Richards or pick a guy from the Baltimore Orioles or anybody else. I'm talking about some high-level guys. DeGrom has been quiet. He hasn't said anything, but which, in my opinion, shows that he really has been innocent. Maybe not innocent, because you never know. He probably might be actually using some substance, but he might be really good at hiding it. Who knows? But of course, guys like Garrett Cole, Tyler Glasnow, just guys like that, before all this started, they were putting up a stink. And man, just that press conference, the second one that Garrett Cole had, where he dropped the Pete's sake, for Pete's sake, and was stumbling around, and it was really bad. Oh my God, it was pathetic. You're a grown ass man. You're a major league pitcher, and the same goes for you, Tyler Class. Now, trying to pull one over on us as fans. What's going on? You're, like I said, you're a grown ass man. You're a major league pitcher. You've been pitching for your whole life. And I get it. There are some times where you need some substance so that you're not going to drill guys in the head. But still, let's be honest. You're not using the substance here so that you can get a better grip all the time. You get a better grip so that you're not going to plunk guys. You're getting it so you can get a better spin rate on your pitches, so that you have a better spin on that curveball. So that thing looks like it's coming out one end and going out way over to the West Coast or somewhere. So basically Bugs Bunny style pitches. Watching guys taking these cartoon style hacks up at the plate. That's what you're using it for. Let's be honest. And let's not say, oh, this has only been going on for the last 2-3 years. No, this has been going on basically since the start of baseball. Everybody's been trying to get that edge. Now, with the way things have jumped forward in the leap of technology over the last 20 years, obviously the substances have gotten a lot better. We're not just talking about pine tar and Vaseline and Vagisil and Bardol. Yeah, I know. For those of you who watch Major League, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I just what I quoted. But basically, you get the whole drift. This isn't the old days where there were other substances besides just cooking agents or whatever to use. There were other things. But now that we're into this modern time where there are a lot of other things like Spider Tech. Now, Spider Tech, for those of you who don't know, is something that Olympic weightlifters, Mr. Universe, Strongest Man competition use for those giant stone balls. That if you look it up online, those ones that are the size of like a pretty good size, not exercise ball, not the weighted medicine balls, but those bigger exercise balls that you sit on, do some ab workouts or whatever you end up using them for. Things of those size that those Olympic weightlifters, Mr. Universe competitors, they put that substance on their hands, on their arms, so that they can lift those things. Of course, that's totally different sport. So I'm not talking about trying to lift up gigantic weights. They use the substance. Now, how they get it down to a point where the ball's not sticking to their hand when they're trying to throw it, that part I'm not sure. But it's a substance that's that sticky that they're somehow getting into their hat, their glove, wherever it is, that they get into a substance that's not ultra sticky, where it's going to look like a bad movie where the ball's just hanging there the whole time. But at the same time, they're using these substances. They're using boiling down Coca-Cola and mixing pine tar, using bullfrog, not just so they hit people, but so they can get better spin rates. So what has that done? Of course, over the last couple of weeks, where they were talking about this is going to happen, baseball released the statement that we're going to start checking pitchers and play, and not just pitchers, but they said they would check players, but the big one has been pitchers. Now, fast forward to these last couple of days, especially last night, you had Max Scherzer come unglued. He got checked. The first time wasn't too bad, but then the second time when Joe Girardi had him checked, of course, he takes off the hat, puts down the glove, and gives the whole, oh, why me? Oh, I'm good. Whatever he said to the umpires, got unflapped the belt. And of course, I feel like a child. But then came the third one where Joe Girardi In the middle of the inning, he pointed out to the umpires he wanted them to check because he saw Max Scherzer take off his cap, his hat, and run his hand through his hair. So, of course, Girardi wants him to check. And then Max Scherzer loses his ever-loving mind. He wanted to basically fight Joe Girardi. I mean, as a Red Sox fan, I mean, that would kind of be cool after he coached the Yankees for all those years and was a catcher for the Yankees. So maybe on a side note, wouldn't be bad. Would kind of be entertaining. But from a whole standpoint of Max Scherzer, though, he just lost his mind, lost his marbles out there. And of course, yeah, I know you're a competitor and I know you don't want something to mess it up, but at the same time, you have nobody but yourself to blame, Max. Nobody else but yourself. I don't care if you're using it or not using it. You and the rest of Major League Baseball and the rest of all the staffs across Major League Baseball, those starting staffs, bullpens, you have nobody else to blame but yourself. Don't think that I'm going to feel bad or some of these other fans are going to feel bad. You're going to have your few sympathizers, but I'm sure as hell not going to feel bad for you. Why? Because you're breaking a rule that's been in place for a long time, not just for 5 years, 10 years. That's been in the books for basically ever in baseball. And if, like I said, everybody tries to skirt the rules. And when it gets to the point where everything's blatantly obvious, like it has been, where all these spin rates have dropped 150, 200, 300, 400, 500 RPMs, where it's noticeable to see that your curveball, which was nasty, and then all of a sudden it's just a mediocre piece of crap that's hanging up there, that Rafael Devers, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Fernando Tatis is just going to hit 5,000 feet and that thing still hasn't come down yet. Of course, we all know what you were doing. And don't try to make us feel bad and play the victim here. This is all on you. It's all on you. It really is. And of course, the other incident that happened last night that just had me busting a gut was Sergio Romo, who now pitches for the Oakland Athletics. He was being checked in the middle of the innings, and he was so fed up with it that he just started stripping everything off, took off the hat, took off the glove, threw all that down on the ground, and he took off his belt and started to drop his pants. And of course, the umpire there is like, no. And I get it. The umpires, it's like TSA right now. They're all checking you down. They're all making sure that there's nothing hidden there. Of course, the umpires, we give them a lot of crap, but of course, you know that they don't want to sit there and do it. They don't want to have to do this every inning. They just want to do it if something's blatantly obvious. They don't want to have to be the police out there as far as having to do this every inning. Now, they'll be they don't mind being the police in all kinds of other situations. It's just they don't want to have to slow down this game and be the police from that standpoint. So my whole point being in this situation is that this is all on you as a major league pitcher. Max Scherzer, Sergio Romo, Garrett Cole, Tyler Glasnow. Don't start sitting there and blaming that this caused it, that you were doing this to prevent injuries, to prevent hitting people or doing things like that. You were trying to cheat and trying to get ahead, which if you guys kept it in your little club there and didn't make everything so goddamn obvious, you might not be in this situation if you just kept a little secret handshake instead of just making everything so publicly obvious with what's going on with all the substance out there, with all the sticky foreign substances that end up on these baseballs. Then you wouldn't be in this damn situation. You'd still be out there with your spider tack, your Coca-Cola, and pine tar mixtures, bullfrog, whatever you use, you'd still be out there using it. No, I'm not sitting here advocating that they do it, but you sound like children. You sound like little children out there arguing. You bitch and moan and complain. You want us to feel bad. And no, I'm not having it. You sound ridiculous. This is a situation you put yourselves in. You're a major league pitcher. Go out there and find another way to throw a curveball, throw your fastball with a little bit more backspin to it. Find a way. Find a way. You're not going to find any sympathy from me. It's just absolutely, absolutely ridiculous. You're complaining about something that's been in the rule books forever. And yes, I do want you to get a grip so you don't hurt somebody. That I do want you to do. So if you have rosin, or you have a little bit of just plain old pine tar or something like that, that doesn't bother me. But when you start to go to Spider Tech, Coca-Cola, and pine tar, whatever your mixture concoction of choice is, when you're using it to try to get your advantage over these hitters. Yeah, and I know these hitters aren't exactly the cleanest in the book. We all know the steroids. We all know those things happen. I'm not going to sit here and ignore that. And of course it happened. But still, when you want to sit here and sit and bitch and complain that you've been allowed to do this for a long time, that you still should be able to. No, you're making this way more obvious than this should have been. You only have yourselves to blame. You really do. And I just can't take any more of these players whining and complaining. Like somebody on the Red Sox, i.e. Garrett Richards, who got his lunch handed to him here again this evening. Now the Red Sox are losing 5-1. And listen, for a brief shining moment for about a month, I thought Garrett Richards might have turned a corner. Well, maybe because you're using sticky stuff, you're back to being Joe average Garrett Richards. Not that he was anything to really write home about, but he was starting to turn that corner. But now he's back to just being good old Garrett Richards that gets shelled pretty much every other start or so. It's ridiculous. Don't sit there and complain. I know after his last start where he only threw pretty much fastballs, cut fastballs, didn't really throw his curve at all, mixed in a few sliders. You wanted us to feel bad for you, Garrett. You really did. I'm not going to. Listen, I'm not sitting here hoping that anything bad happens or anything like that. But when you go out there and you moan and complain, you bitch about everything going on, that you're not allowed to use these substances, that you basically say, oh, you've been in situations where there have been mounds where sometimes you don't see rosin and all that type of stuff. No, I'm not going to buy that. You watch a baseball game on TV, for Christ's sake, and you can see the rosin sitting right on the back of the mound. I can see it right now. I've seen it pretty much every night this year that I've watched a game. It's there. And you try to make these excuses, and you want Red Sox fans to sit there and believe you? No. You're getting shelled because you don't have any more Spider Tech or whatever you're using. So you have to go out there and throw nasty curveballs, although your curveball wasn't really nasty this year, even when you were using it. So I don't even know how good it was doing for you, to be honest. You're still going out there and throwing up late dead ducks that guys were knocking around. Hence again tonight, where you gave up a couple bombs. I'm getting so fed up with the reaction from pitchers. Now, some of it, like I said, the things like Sergio Romo did and Max Scherzer, those were funny, to be honest. Those are funny to watch, but it's more to me, the whining and complaining is the part that really I could just deal without. And of course, the whole situation with Joe Girardi last night, that did kind of make me that made me laugh, because it's like, all right, Max, you're upset with Joe, it's gamesmanship. Of course, these guys are going to use it. If you want it to stop, then there has to be some type of rule implemented where if the umpire keeps going out there 4 or 5 times an inning or a game to check you, then yeah, there might be something where you might need to put in some type of rule where, I don't know, maybe if you do it, you lose a challenge or something like that, or a guy gets put on second base, kind of like an extra innings. I'm not sure how that's all going to go, but if you want it to stop, then that would be the way to do it. But until that happens, guess what? It's all fair game. So I just don't feel bad for you. And I know I mentioned Garrett Richards just a second ago with how he's handling the situation, how poorly he's handled the situation, in my opinion, with all the sticky situation on baseball. But he's not the only Red Sox pitcher that's been having a tough go of it here. Now, as you mentioned early on, the Red Sox are back in first place. They are a game and a half up over Tampa Bay, although they are losing tonight 5-1. Their offense is keeping them in games. Their defense has had a few rough patches in Kansas City, but all in all, it's been middle of the road. It's been decent. So there have been games where it cost them, but basically that offense has slugged their way to basically getting them back on this division. Evaldi is really the one really reliable pitcher. Pivetta, I would throw in Pivetta there, but to the rest of the rotation with Garrett Richards, Perez has fallen out of his tree, to quote Dennis Eckersley. And Garrett Richards is just out there whining and complaining that he can't use sticky substances over these last couple starts. I'll be curious to see what he says tonight after his start, to be completely honest. I want to know if he goes all last game on us and just whines and complains and says that, yeah, this is what you're going to get, and we need the substances and stuff like that. So basically, it has been kind of curious to see how most of this pitching staff is done post MLB changing the rules over this last couple of weeks, where players are starting to get ramped up for this week where they were officially monitoring it. So it's been a bumpy ride. It hasn't been since that Toronto series. It hasn't been disastrous. Kansas City was more the defense letting them down, but still, it wasn't all these glowing 1-0 shutouts, 2-0, 3-2 games that this pitching staff was throwing out. And even Evaldi had a clunker on Sunday against the Royals. But really, right now, Evaldi and Pivetta are the only ones that are still clicking. And like I said, Garrett Richards and Martin Perez are the real problem child of this. Erod's on a little bit of a different plane here, because over the last couple of starts, I have seen things that I like. The velocity's there, the movement's back. The defense last night didn't help him out. He only gave up 3 earned runs, and that was on an absolute missile from the top prospect in all of baseball, and Wander Franco. So to me, Erod, well, he's not completely where I want him to be. I'm seeing signs that he might start to be coming out of it. Now, there's still probably about half of that tunnel to go, but I see better signs than I do out of Martin Perez or Garrett Richards. I'm still not happy with the end results, but there are more encouraging things that I'm seeing, like I said, with pitch location, with the movement, with the life of those pitches. It's not like it was earlier in May, where some of those pitches that he was throwing looked a little lifeless, didn't look like the same Erod. But still, Erod, Perez, and Richards right now, both of them need to, or all three of them need to get back on track. They need to become, at least Erod and Richards need to be more reliable especially Erod needs to be an anchor along with a volley until Sale gets back, because this pitching staff, if once we get into August and September, once we get into the heart of the playoff race, that's where I'm starting to get a little bit worried. I still believe in the Red Sox that they're still going to be right in the heart of this division to actually take the division home, because if you look at it, the rest of the starting rotations around the American League East are not in any better shape. Yeah, I know the Yankees have Garrett Cole, but after all this stuff with the substances, his spin rates have gone down 200, 300 points from what they were. And if you need to look at that, there is a website out there that you can find all the spin rates. That actually has been really good that you can look at. But to me, honestly, what's going on with this pitching staff, this is really concerning to me, because I really don't see how, once you start to get into this deep into the pennant race, how if this thing continues with Garrett Richards, if it continues with Martin Perez, and if it continues with Erod, that only leaves you two guys, and you don't want to bank all your hopes on Chris Sale having to be there with him and just Evaldi. Now, maybe if Tanner Houck comes up after being healthy again, he just was reactivated. He looks like he's ready to go. Probably pitch maybe 2-3 weeks down in Worcester. So if you can bring him back, then maybe I feel a little bit better. But if you're just putting all your hopes on Chris Sale, then I'm a little bit worried about where this staff is gonna be once we get towards the end of the season. But like I said, that aside, because obviously being a Red Sox fan, you focus heavily on that. But if you look at the rest of the division, it's Garrett Cole and nobody else, because Luis Severino is not back for the Yankees yet. Corey Kluber had that no-hitter and had a good stretch, but he's fallen back down to earth. And the Toronto Blue Jays have just fallen off, not offensively, but the rest of that team has just been left behind in the dirt. They, at one point, were right there in the thick of the division, but they are back 6 to 8 games of the lead in first of the Red Sox. So things just aren't what people thought they were going to be between the Yankees and obviously, and not forgetting here, the Tampa Bay Rays, who for a while looked like they were going to be the biggest thorn in the side of the Red Sox, even though they went to the World Series last year, when they traded away a lot of their starters and Snell being the main piece, and they lost Charlie Morton. You're like, oh, you're going to have you're going to have Tyler Glasnow, and that's really it. But they, to their credit, have stayed right in the thick of this thing. And then also on top of that, they, for a while, had Tyler Glasnow, who looked like the AL Cy Young winner. But now that he's out and injured, coincidentally, they lost 7 in a row. So I would say they're a little demoralized as far as what the Tampa Bay Rays are facing. Now, obviously, it's not 7. They're not going to continually lose and lose and lose if you're Tampa. Things are going to start to turn around, because this is an organization that always finds a way as far as pitching wise. That's their hallmark over the last 12, 14 years has been good pitching. So I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to be in trouble pitching wise the whole way, but at least for the next 3 weeks to a month, that's where they're going to be in some shaky territory, where if they don't start to solidify that rotation with how good Boston's been playing with their issues, with Boston's loaded offense, they might be in trouble. They might fall 5 or 6 games and maybe 7 games behind Boston if you can't get better starting pitching. So, yeah, like I said, it might not be sustained. This probably won't be sustainable as far as the losing pace, which would be good for the Red Sox. But even to that point, though, if the rest of this division, if they're still having pitching woes and the Yankees have woes in their lineup, then the Red Sox, at least all season long, have had a good lineup. And don't come at me with the bottom of the lineup. Who the hell in baseball, besides the Dodgers, has a 1 through 9? That's always one of my pet peeves. I'm not going to get into that today, but still, would they have a good lineup basically all the way through? And if Bobby Dahlbeck starts to warm up, then look out, and you have basically 7 guys, 6, 7 guys in that lineup, then you can rely on and score runs. So I still feel good where the Red Sox are. The bullpen has actually been pretty good, even after all the spin rate sticky situation has come through. It's the starting rotation. Now, like I said, the big thing here, and actually just some other news that have happened with the Red Sox, is Chris Sale. We mentioned if they can get him back, that would be a big boon for the rotation. He actually started to throw. He was up here in Portland throwing with the Sea Dogs. Now, he didn't pitch in a game, but since the Sea Dogs were at home, he was there to throw. That game did get rained out, but he at least got his warm-ups in, or his facing the live batters in. And from all accounts, he looked pretty good. So that's a good sign. So that means he's getting closer to going on some rehab starts. He's probably right where he would be, in my opinion, right at the beginning of games at spring training. So he's right at that mode where you'd be in spring training making your first or second start. So I feel really good about that whole situation, because Chris Sale said that he's felt the best that he has since he was really a kid. And hey, if you get back your number one ace, and when Chris Sale is on and healthy, he's a top 5 pitcher in baseball, along with DeGrom and Scherzer and who else you want to throw in there. At worst, a top 10 pitcher when he's healthy. But if you can get him back, and like I mentioned, if you can get Tanner Houck back, those are 2 big reinforcements that I'd feel a lot better about the rotation, because then you can send a guy like Martin Perez either out to the bullpen, or you can DFA him. And then if you bring in Tanner Houck, then that's where Garrett Richards really starts to sweat bullets there, because that's the guy. Because I think Nick Pivetta is safe, even though his last couple starts haven't been as sharp. He's still, even in these last couple starts, they've been able to win and get through those games. So he's shown more to me than Garrett Richards has, who gets rocked pretty much the last 3 starts. And if that continues, then I think that's where Perez and Richards are the 2 that are really on the chopping block for the Red Sox. That once those guys get healthy, that's where you're going to see them. I think maybe the first couple times around for Sale, since he's been out for a year and a half, that's where you go to a 6-man rotation. But in the long run, those 2 guys are the ones that once Sale and Houck get back, those are the Richards and Perez are the 2 that you got to have your heads on a swivel, because you're on deck as far as the chopping block's concerned. Now, with the Red Sox, as I mentioned, they're in first place, and 2 of the surprises over the last, I'd say, 2 weeks have been Hunter Renfroe and Bobby Dahlbeck. Now, Hunter Renfroe's been doing this a lot longer this season. He's hitting just above 260 at 263. Did hit another big home run last night and actually came through in the extra innings. He's looked pretty good. He's looked like a steal, an absolute steal for the Red Sox. So that offseason signing, Shine Bloom gets an A+ for that one, because I honestly didn't think that was going to be anything other than just like a C- signing with a guy that has a lot of power, but maybe going to be in that Reynolds, Jared Reynolds, Josh Reynolds, the first baseman who was played for the Diamondbacks for a long time. He was one of the guys basically in that mold that I thought Renfroe was in. Has a ton of power, good RBI producer, but just is not what you would think of as an everyday player. But to his credit, Hunter Renfroe has come in, earned that everyday spot, hitting well into well over 250. He's, like I said, hitting 263 at this point, 9 home runs. He's a guy that, not all-star, but he's one of those key cogs in a lineup for a contending team that just keeps things going down low in the order. And the other surprise has been Bobby Dahlbeck, who was off to a pretty cold start through April and May. Yeah, the power was starting to come again. He's at 9 home runs, but the average was starting to sink, where he was below the Mendoza line, which for you, those of you who don't know, is 200 or lower. Now, Bobby Dahlbeck over the last 6-7 games has been hitting 386, been hitting really well. Has actually clubbed 3 home runs over that stretch. So he has really come along here over the last week. Now, I'm not going to get all hyped up about it and say Bobby Dahlbeck's going to be back in the Rookie of the Year contention or anything like that. But still, if Bobby Dahlbeck can get his average up to somewhere in that 230s, 240s range before the All-Star break, and he has around 15 home runs, driving in about 40 or so, then that's a pretty good 1 through 7 right there. Or even if Bobby has 12 home runs at the break, has 13 or whatever it may be. If you're producing with power, producing, driving in runs, you start to bring that average up, then I really like what he would bring to the table down low. Now, I still think you need to bring in a veteran first baseman, somebody that you can platoon with him, or at least give him a spell when he starts to get into some of those slumps and the prolonged slumps. I'm not talking about those 2-3 game slumps, but I'm talking like the ones that he had early in the year where it was 12, 15, close to 20 games where his production was bad. But I think if you bring in a veteran that can come in here on the cheap that you can pair with him, then I like that, because I know a lot of people got really hot and bothered last year with Bobby Dahlbeck and all his 8 home runs that he had in a short span of time with the Red Sox, and it looked like, oh boy, he's going to be a stud next year. I still like Bobby. He might have a spot maybe going into left field if you want to not bring back Marwin Gonzalez. Maybe he could transition. I'm not sure, because you do have Jared Duran who's coming up, so that might start to crowd the outfield if you want to bring back Renfroe. So I'm not sure where that would be. Maybe Bobby might be a DH option. If JD leaves, you never know. But if short term, could be a nice stopgap until Tristan Cassius, the top Red Sox prospect, who's a power hitting first baseman, would be ready. So if Bobby can be a serviceable to above average first baseman that has that pop in the order, then I really like that. And that's been a good surprise here over the last week or so that Bobby's been heating up. And that's a really good sign for this Red Sox team. You already have a middle of the order who all 3 of them are pretty much guaranteed to go to the All-Star game. Even if JD doesn't start over Ohtani, he's going to be the backup. He'll be that second guy that they have DH. So that middle, that 3, 4, 5, with Bogarts and Devers who are leading in their voting. So you have an all-star middle of the order. Even a guy like Verdugo is on the fringes of being one of those top 9 that's going to be going to that second round of the voting. So they have a really good lineup, really good. And Bobby can lengthen that out, then great. I really like that. Now, I teased it at the beginning of the show. We're going to introduce a new segment here that I like to call the little things. Now, in this segment, it could be anything. Maybe not even entirely sports related. Might have a connection, might kind of be entertaining. You never know. So just picking some little things that either bug me, get me excited, or little things like that just maybe didn't touch on earlier in the show or really intrigued me. And in this week's episode, our pick for the little things that this week, it's going to be the little things that bug me, is that Madden last week came out with their announcement for the GOAT cover of Madden 2022. Now, Madden is a game that I've been playing since I was, 10 years old. I remember playing Madden 01 on the PlayStation, and it's progressively going. I remember Madden 05 was one that I played religiously. I probably played like 10, 12 seasons on franchise mode, played that religiously, and that was so fun. I remember that's when they had Bethel Johnson, and in real life, Bethel Johnson sucked. But in the video game, I just remember he was really fast. I believe he was like 97, 95 on his speed. You just throw bombs all day and break touchdown records, because that was back before they started having all the realistic ratings and skills. Not that they didn't have realistic skill sets, but before everything got as real as it is today. I know everybody bitches about it, but still. But the point being, I remember playing it all the time, and I've pretty much since 2004, 2005, I've gotten it every year, because when I started to get either allowance or birthday money, Christmas money, whatever, I'd save it up since then and really buy each year's copy. And obviously, being an adult, working full time, I pretty much buy it every year. And I know people give me crap. Well, it's the same game. It's the same game. And I'm kind of addicted to Madden. Even though they do need to change some things, they certainly do. And one thing, in my opinion, that little thing that they need to change is that after they said it was the GOAT cover, it's the GOATS edition, which is going to be Tom Brady, who is the actual GOAT of football. And then the part that pisses me off, that little thing that pisses me off, is that Patrick Mahomes is the other GOAT that they're putting on the cover. Now, first off, the term GOAT means greatest of all time, and there can only be one. There can only be one. Come on now. I love Patrick Mahomes, but you're going to put him in Brady's class already? I mean, at this point in time in his career, Patrick Mahomes is physically more gifted, better quarterback. Obviously everything's up here with Brady, upstairs for Brady. So in that standpoint, Brady's running multiple not even laps, multiple marathons around Patrick Mahomes. Now, don't get me wrong, Patrick Mahomes is destined for greatness, and he's already starting to achieve some of it. But let's pump the brakes on Patrick Mahomes as far as the GOAT or being a GOAT. Because, like I said, the term GOAT is greatest of all time, and there can only be one. As far as, especially when we're talking about quarterbacks. Now, if you want to make the case like greatest tight end, greatest wide receiver of all time, sure, whatever. We can split hairs on that. Maybe I would say, okay, we could put the greatest defensive player along with Brady. Sure, fine. But when you say the word GOAT and then you have two quarterbacks, guess what? It's the greatest of all time. You can only have one only one greatest quarterback of all time. And Brady's it. I mean, if you want him on the cover again, sure. I still have my Patriot, the one with 2018 with Brady on the cover with him. I'll always keep that one on file. But still, for Christ's sake, it's the term GOAT. It just pisses me off. And not just when Madden does it, when anybody does it. When they say, oh, Brady, well, not when Brady's GOAT, because Brady is the real GOAT. He is the GOAT. But when you say Patrick Mahomes is the GOAT, and then you go, well, Aaron Rodgers is the GOAT, and you see people tweet out something or Instagram something, and it says, ooh, the GOAT, the baby GOAT, the this GOAT, or whatever. People, GOAT, you can only have one GOAT. You can only have one in whatever sport you're talking about. And I might grant you we can talk about the GOAT of a position, but if I give you that, then guess what? We can only have one at quarterback. So that, like I said, it's a little thing, hence the segment. It's not anything the world's going to end over it. I get it. But still, it's the greatest of all time. And if you're going to have you're going to have a quarterback, you can only have one. You want to put Randy Moss, like I saw that on there somewhere, that would be cool. Although Jerry Rice, you're going to get a lot of people arguing that one, including myself. I love Randy to death. Randy's the second best. But still, point is, it's one. And I see it all the time, not just football. You see it in baseball, like Fernando Tatis, who I love watching. He's so exciting to watch, but people will be like, oh, the young GOAT. And then they'll talk about, like, I've seen Red Sox fans go like, oh, Bogarts is the GOAT or whatever, or something like that. I'm like, you see people just throw it out there. Now, the only player right now in baseball that you could throw a GOAT out there, and I'm not talking pitchers, I'm talking position players, is Mike Trout. End of story. The rest of them still have a long way to go in their career as far as a lot of the young stars. Not that these guys don't deserve their accolades, but when you start to throw out the term GOAT, don't put it on somebody that's 23 years old and has played in 2 years of the league. Yeah, if they've won an MVP and they're really good, they've made all-stars, they're all pros, whoever, whatever sport you're talking about, sure, they're great. I love watching them. But don't throw the term GOAT when there's already guys that are the actual GOAT, i.e. Tom Brady, baseball. If you want to put Willie Mays or Hank Aaron, whoever you want to make that argument for, there is one. There is only one, at least at that position. And in baseball, it's a little bit different but I'm not going to start to get into that position, that discussion as far as all that. That's maybe a summertime argument, like a middle of the summertime argument around the All-Star break here in a two weeks or so, 3 weeks when it's the dog days. We might do something like that. But at this point in time, I'm just going to stick with just what irks me is that you want to use the term GOAT and you're pretty much just talking about, and that would only mean one. You can only have one GOAT. Now, as far as the other little thing that interested me, that kind of intrigued me here, was that Brady was on a podcast earlier last week that just got released, where he was around. It was the Shop. It wasn't it was the podcast / show that LeBron James has, the Shop. And in that show, they obviously were talking about a lot of things. And when they got to the segment about Brady and free agency, they started to talk about all the teams that he was visiting. And of course, when they got to a certain segment, it never actually came out. Brady never said which team it was, but there was a quote where Brady says, "You're sticking with that mother bleeper." And that's where a lot of speculation came out as far as who that MFer was that they were talking about. And then, of course, there was going to be that one reporter out there that says, "Oh, I know." And Jeff Darlington, who now works for ESPN, came out and said that it was the New Orleans Saints, which that one I have a little issue with. Brady has always admired Drew Brees. Yeah, I know the arm is shot, and I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I'm not saying that he's like entirely wrong. He could be, for all I know, but I'm going to call BS on that one, just from the standpoint that Brady always talks highly of Drew Brees. He loves Drew Brees. Brady was a year behind. He was in 2000. I should say flop it. Brady was a year ahead when 2000, and Brees won in 2001. So they're basically in the same era, the same draft, basically the same draft class. So basically, he has a lot of respect. He loves him some Drew Brees. If anybody on the Saints that they were talking about, it would have had to have been Jameis Winston. But again, he wasn't the starter. So that one I don't quite buy, but just with all the love and admiration that he has for Drew Brees, I don't think he would MF Drew Brees. If I was going to put my money on this, I have to say San Francisco. I have to say San Fran. And I know Brady got to see Jimmy every single day for 2014 until the day he got traded in 2017 at practice. And I think it has more to do with him staying healthy, because obviously Brady would love nothing more than to go back to his childhood team in San Francisco, that team that he watched Joe Montana win 4 Super Bowls with. He wanted so bad. At least this was my opinion. I think he wanted so bad to go back to San Francisco and lead that team to a Super Bowl and bring them multiple not multiple. Well, you never know in this day and age with Brady, although he did say that the age of 50 thing was kind of a long shot. But point being, this is something where I think Brady wanted to go back to San Francisco, wanted to be that guy to finally don that, not maroon, but that blood red, basically, uniform and gold helmet. Side note, those are, I want to say the best, but I love the old school Patriots throwbacks. I'm torn on that, but they're one of my favorite uniforms of all time, are those classic Niners uniforms. But Brady wanted to go back, basically throw on the classic unis, play in his hometown, bring his hometown team to the Super Bowl and win. And Garoppolo has not been healthy other than the one season in 2019, 2 years ago, when he lost to the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes in Super Bowl 54. So, of course, I think that's what it comes down to when Brady's talking about MFing somebody, is that's who you're sticking with, is Garoppolo, just because he can't stay injured. I've heard some other good ones out there. I heard Tennessee. Now, Tennessee is one where Tennessee would be the second one for me if I was going to rank these. For Tennessee reason, I think it would be not more the fact that Tannehill hasn't been good since he's had his whole resurgence there, but I think it has more to do with he's comfortable with Mike Vrabel, who was his teammate in New England. Obviously, everybody remembers 5-0, big number 50, Mike Vrabel making all those big plays. So I think they're good buddies. So I think Brady would be comfortable saying those type of things to him. And I think Brady has that vision of Ryan Tannehill in Miami, where Brady was constantly beating him down in Miami. Obviously, occasionally Miami would win, but of course, Brady would always make Miami look silly. They'd be his bitch, basically. And I just think that one would be second for me, just because of the comfortability that he would have with Mike Vrabel and just how he used to whip up on Ryan Tannehill and the Dolphins. So that one's a close second for me. But to me, it still has to be the Niners because of the whole injury factor with Jimmy Garoppolo. And just basically since he's been there in 2018, and then this year, or not this year, but last year in 2020, he wasn't able to stay healthy. So there's just been a litany of things there for Jim. And even when he got there, immediately after in 2017, he had a few injuries. So it just hasn't been a smooth ride for Jimmy. Don't get me wrong, I love Jimmy. I would, before they drafted Mac Jones, before they drafted him, I would have said I'd take Jimmy. Of course, you're going to need a security blanket there because he's going to get injured. But I can see that. That's going to be my top pick. So that was one of the things where, not like the Madden cover where that irritated me, the little things, but this was one of the little things that intrigued me from that standpoint. So I was kind of interested to see that. And that's something that kind of wish we got to see more of that from Brady over the years. Now, I'm not really big into a lot of the big gossip and stuff, all the other TV shows. I'm not watching anything on reality TV wise. I know some other people out there love reality TV, Big Brother, Survivor, things like that. I don't like it, but sports reality stuff, I can kind of, that's where I do kind of land on the hypocritical side, because there are times where some of that stuff does interest me a little bit. And in this case, I would have loved to have seen some of the reality behind what it would have been like if Brady said these things when he was still playing in New England in his heyday. That would have been kind of interesting. Obviously, never going to get there. We got a few little snippets, but nothing. He was never going to roast anybody like that when he was here with New England, other than Roger Goodell with the whole Deflategate thing. But that was really cool, and that was fun to see. I'll have to check out that full episode, even though I'm not a big LeBron fan. I'll have to do that because obviously I'm a Brady fan to the day that I die, even though he's now in Tampa. But still really intrigued me. And of course, as we close things out here, just want to remind you all that the show's Twitter account is up and running now. Again, it is at Sean Met. I'm sorry, I'm giving out mine here. Sean Met 28. No, it's For the show account, it's at NE Sports Weekly on Twitter. So again, it's at NE Sports Weekly at Twitter. So just search that handle for you. And the Instagram account will be up here as well, along with the Facebook account. But that Twitter account is already up and running. So send me your questions. I try to post as much as I can on there. Lately, been posting a lot about baseball and things like that. So that's if you're into baseball, making fun of some of those pitchers out there, that'll be up on the account and just posting anything like that. So give that a follow. And as always, send me your questions on Twitter. Be prepared next week for the live show. You can always send in your questions there. We'll follow the Red Sox if anything also pops up with the Patriots as we're in quiet season, quote unquote, even though there's always something that seems to come up, i.e. Brady this week. And the Celtics, as they now have a head coach, we'll see if they start to make some moves here, although we're not into free agency until the NBA finals are over, but if they start to hear some rumblings. So we'll keep our ear to the ground on everything Boston sports. In the meantime, everybody have a good week, and we'll talk to you on next Wednesday on New England Sports Weekly.